"Meet Emma, Daniel's talented student," I said, sliding his credit card statement across our dining table as his face turned to ash. The crystal chandelier swayed slightly in the tense silence. Daniel choked on his wine. Emma, gorgeous, 22-year-old Emma, extended her manicured hand with practiced poise that shattered when she spotted the highlighted Tiffany receipt for $2,000. "What the hell is this?" Daniel hissed, dropping his fork with a clatter that echoed through our dining room. I smiled, refilling Emma's glass. "Just getting acquainted with the woman you're spending our house down payment on." I tapped the statement where I'd circled weekend getaways, designer jewelry, and dinners costing more than my monthly car payment. All on our joint account. All while I worked overtime to save for our future. Emma's perfectly glossed lips parted. "Professor Parker told me you were separated," she whispered, her voice trembling. 15 years married, I replied, maintaining eye contact with my husband. Though apparently he's been enjoying a different arrangement. Daniel slammed his palm on the mahogany table. "This is insane, Samantha. Emma is just my student, and what else?" I slid another paper across the table, text messages I'd printed that morning. "Your muse? Your perfect escape? Your midlife crisis made flesh." Emma gasped as she recognized their intimate exchanges. Her Innocence Act crumbled instantly. The kitchen door swung open as my brother Jack stepped into the dining room, arms crossed over his chest. Daniel hadn't seen him arrive earlier. The backup I'd never needed until today. "What the fuck is he doing here?" Daniel snarled, panic replacing his professor's composure. I placed my hand on the thick manila folder before me. "Insurance. In case you thought this conversation might get physical." Emma grabbed her purse. "I should go." "Sit down," I commanded, my voice cutting like ice. "You've spent $20,000 of my money. The least you can do is finish this meal." 3 months ago, I wouldn't have recognized myself in this moment. Confrontation wasn't my style. Avoidance was my specialty, smoothing over difficult conversations, redirecting tension. It made me an excellent editor, diffusing author egos with a diplomatic touch. But it had made me a doormat in my marriage. The first sign had been subtle, Daniel coming home at midnight with excuses about department meetings running late. Unusual for a university that strictly enforced building closures at 10. But I'd accepted it because questioning meant conflict. Then came the credit card statements. Charging expensive dinners in Philadelphia when he was supposedly at a conference in Chicago. The first time I saw it, I convinced myself it was a billing delay, charges posting days after they occurred. But the Tiffany's purchase broke through my denial. $2,000, more than Daniel had ever spent on any gift for me in 15 years of marriage. My husband, the frugal academic who complained about the cost of my salon visits, had bought jewelry I'd never seen. I'd sat in our home office that night, scrolling through months of statements, building a spreadsheet of discrepancies. The methodical work calmed me while my world collapsed. By morning, I'd documented over $15,000 in suspicious charges. "You're working late," Daniel had said, finding me at the computer. I'd closed the screen. "Book deadline. You know how it is." He'd kissed my forehead. "Don't wait up tonight." Faculty Senate meeting. The lie had slid so easily from his lips that I'd almost admired his skill. Almost. That's when I'd called Jack. "I need your help," I'd said when he answered. My brother had always been protective, but he'd respected my independence. When I'd explained the situation, he hadn't pushed for immediate confrontation like I'd feared. "What do you want to do?" he'd asked instead. That was the moment I decided to stop being passive in my own life. "I want to know everything," I'd answered. "And then I want to destroy him." Now Daniel glared across the table, a cornered animal. "You've been spying on me?" "Investigating," I corrected. "Something I should have done years ago." Emma looked between us. "Daniel told me you were separated. That you were just living together until the divorce was finalized." I laughed, a harsh sound that surprised even me. "Did he also tell you our house is in my name? That his tenure review is next month?" That we're trying to have a baby. The last part was a lie, but I wanted to see his reaction. The flash of panic confirmed what I suspected. He'd crafted different narratives for different audiences. The perfect compartmentalizer. "This is a misunderstanding," Daniel said, reaching for Emma's hand. She pulled away. I opened the folder, removing a stack of papers. "Is it? Because I have statements showing you've spent over $20,000 on Emma in the past 6 months. Our money, Daniel. The money we were saving for a down payment on a vacation property." "You've always been so controlling about money," he snapped, desperation finding an outlet in anger. "Monitoring every cent, questioning every purchase. Is that what you told her?" I interrupted. "That your controlling wife kept you on an allowance? While you drained our accounts for hotel rooms." Emma stood again, this time with purpose. "I didn't know you were still together." "I swear." She grabbed her purse. "This isn't what I signed up for." "What exactly did you sign up for, Emma?" I asked, genuine curiosity in my voice. "When you started sleeping with your married professor. The man who grades your papers and writes your recommendation letters." Daniel slammed his hand on the table. "That's enough. This is between us, not her. It stopped being just between us when you put her name on our Amex, Daniel." Jack stepped forward. "Watch your tone, Professor." Daniel's eyes darted between us. I could see him calculating, reassessing. The academic in him searching for the argumentative advantage. "How did you get her number?" he asked suddenly. "How did you even know about Emma?" I smiled. "You should be more careful with your phone password. It's still my birthday, by the way." Sentimental or just lazy? The truth was more complicated. Rachel, my best friend of 20 years, had seen them together at Park Restaurant. She'd recognized Daniel immediately, but waited 3 weeks to tell me, weighing loyalty against avoiding my pain. Another betrayal I wasn't ready to process yet. Emma edged toward the door. "I didn't come here to get between a marriage." "I'm sorry, Mrs. Parker." "Miss Parker," I corrected. I kept my name. "And don't leave yet. We're just getting to the good part." I slid another document across the table, a bank statement. This one from an account I discovered only last week. "What's this?" Daniel asked, though his expression told me he already knew. "Your secret account. The one you've been moving our joint funds into. $35,000 so far." I turned to Emma. "Including $5,000 last week, right after you mentioned wanting to study abroad in Paris." Quite a coincidence. Her mouth opened in surprise. "You said that was a departmental grant." Daniel's face contorted with rage. "You had no right to access my private accounts." "Our accounts, Daniel. Pennsylvania is an equitable distribution state. Everything earned during the marriage is marital property." I hadn't slept in weeks, but I'd educated myself thoroughly. "Including your pension, by the way." The power dynamic in the room had shifted completely. Daniel, brilliant, charismatic Daniel, who commanded lecture halls and department meetings, seemed to physically shrink. "What do you want, Samantha?" His voice was flat, defeated. I closed the folder and stood up. "For tonight? I want you to leave. Pack a bag and go to a hotel." "Not with Emma, obviously." I looked at his student. I suspect her interest may have waned. Emma backed toward the door. "I didn't know. I really didn't know you were still together." "Whether you knew or not doesn't change what he did," I said. "But ask yourself, if he lied so easily about his marriage, what else has he been dishonest about?" The next morning, I sat in my attorney's office, the folder of evidence on her desk. Linda Shapiro had come highly recommended by a friend who'd gone through a similar situation. "You've done impressive homework," she said, reviewing my documents. "Most clients come in with suspicions. You've brought evidence." "I'm thorough." "So I see. And what outcome are you hoping for?" I considered the question. What did I want? Revenge had been my first instinct. Make him suffer. Make him lose everything. But after last night, watching Daniel's carefully constructed life collapse, I felt strangely empty. "I want what's fair," I finally said. I want the house I paid for. I want my share of our savings. I want him to understand what he threw away. Linda nodded. And his career? The text between a professor and student, that's a Title IX violation. His university would take immediate action. I'd considered this angle. One email to the department chair would trigger an investigation. Daniel would likely lose tenure, maybe his entire career. The nuclear option. Let's hold that in reserve, I decided. First, I want to see if he'll negotiate fairly. My phone buzzed with a text. Daniel, we need to talk. I can explain everything. I showed it to Linda. She raised an eyebrow. Classic. First comes denial, then anger. Now he wants to explain. Next will be bargaining. Should I respond? Not without me present. She made notes in her file. There's something else we should discuss. Your brother mentioned on the phone that you might be pregnant. The question caught me off guard. The lie I'd told at dinner had been purely tactical, designed to unbalance Daniel and Emma. Or so I'd thought. No, that was just something I said to throw him off balance. Linda looked up. Are you certain? Because if there's a child involved, it changes our strategy considerably. A chill ran through me. I mentally calculated dates. My last period had been. I couldn't remember. With everything happening, I hadn't been tracking. I need to check. She nodded. Do that today. If you're pregnant, we need to know before our first communication with his attorney. I left her office in a daze, stopping at a pharmacy on the way home. 20 minutes later, I stared at 2 pink lines on a plastic stick, my hands shaking. Pregnant. With the child of a man who had just betrayed me in the most fundamental way possible. I sank onto the bathroom floor, phone clutched in my hand. I needed to call someone, but who? Not Daniel. Not yet. Not Rachel, whose delayed warning still stung. Jack would panic, go straight to protective brother mode. The doorbell rang, startling me. Through the peephole, I saw my mother-in-law, Helen. Daniel's mother had always been polite but distant with me, clearly believing her brilliant son had married beneath his potential. During our 15 years together, she'd never once visited without calling first. I considered ignoring her, but curiosity won out. I tucked the pregnancy test into my pocket and opened the door. Helen, this is unexpected. Her normally composed face showed signs of distress. Daniel called me this morning. He's making terrible accusations about you, spying on him, humiliating him in front of a student, threatening his career. Of course he had. Daniel was rewriting the narrative already, casting himself as the victim. Would you like to come in? I stepped aside, oddly calm. I think we should talk. Helen entered cautiously, as if entering enemy territory. He says you've frozen their accounts, that you're trying to destroy him. Our accounts, I corrected automatically. And yes, I've temporarily frozen our joint accounts after discovering he's been systematically draining them. He says you've been distant, cold, that you drove him to seek companionship elsewhere. I laughed, the sound brittle even to my own ears. Is that the story he's going with? That his affair is my fault. So you admit there were problems in the marriage? Every marriage has problems, Helen. Not every spouse responds by sleeping with their students and stealing joint funds. I led her to the living room, where evidence of my investigation remained spread across the coffee table. Bank statements, credit card bills, phone records, all highlighted and annotated. Helen's eyes widened as she took in the display. What is all this? Documentation of your son's activities over the past 6 months. I handed her the credit card statement with the Tiffany purchase highlighted. This is from the joint account where we save for property investments. He bought another woman jewelry worth more than my wedding ring. She stared at the paper, then at several others I placed in front of her. These are hotel charges on days he told me he was at academic conferences. I pointed to another statement. Here's a transfer of $15,000 to a secret account he opened 3 months ago. Helen sank onto the couch. There must be some explanation. Oh, there is. He's having an affair with his graduate student and planning to leave with our money. I sat across from her. What would you like him to explain first? The lying, the stealing, or the fact that he's risking his tenure for a 22-year-old? Helen's hand trembled as she set down the papers. Daniel has always been impulsive, even as a child. Her voice softened. His father was the same way, always chasing the next excitement, never satisfied with what he had. I hadn't expected this turn. In 15 years, Helen had never criticized Daniel or drawn comparisons to his father, who'd left when Daniel was 12. He told you we were having problems? She nodded. He said you were growing apart, that you were consumed with your career, uninterested in his work. While I was editing books, he was editing our bank accounts. The bitterness seeped through despite my resolve to remain calm. Did he mention that I paid off his student loans? That this house is in my name because my credit was better? That I've supported his career at every turn? Helen looked away. No. Did he tell you that the money he's been spending on Emma was meant for our future? For a family? My voice caught on the last word. The pregnancy test felt heavy in my pocket. Helen must have noticed something in my expression. Her eyes narrowed. Samantha, are you pregnant? The question hung in the air between us. I hadn't planned to tell anyone yet, had barely processed the information myself. But something in Helen's face, concern without judgment, broke through my defenses. I'd just found out. Today. Helen closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, something had changed. The polite distance was gone, replaced by a steely determination I'd never seen before. Daniel doesn't know? I shook my head. Good. She gathered the financial documents, stacking them neatly. Don't tell him. Not yet. Why not? Because right now, he thinks he has the upper hand. He thinks he can control the narrative. She straightened her spine, suddenly looking less like the reserved mother-in-law I knew and more like a general preparing for battle. My son needs a lesson in consequences. The next week passed in a blur. Daniel moved into a hotel, bombarding me with texts that evolved exactly as Linda had predicted, from explanations to apologies to bargaining. I forwarded them all to my attorney without responding. Helen, to my continued surprise, became an unexpected ally. She called Daniel's father, who revealed this wasn't Daniel's first financial deception. He'd done something similar during his first marriage, a brief union right after college that he'd never mentioned to me. He has a pattern, Helen explained during one of her daily visits. When he feels trapped or bored, he creates escape hatches. Secret accounts, other women, ways to flee without warning. Why didn't you tell me this before? I thought he'd changed. I wanted to believe he'd grown up. She looked genuinely remorseful. And frankly, I never thought you'd stay together this long. You seemed so different from what I expected for him. Too ordinary. I guessed, voicing a suspicion I'd harbored for years. Too independent, she corrected. I thought he needed someone who would center their life around him, like I did with his father. I was wrong. She patted my hand. You're stronger than I ever was. That's what he couldn't handle. On the 10th day after the dinner confrontation, I received a call from an unknown number. It was Emma. Ms. Parker, she began, her voice tentative. I hope it's okay that I'm calling. Your brother gave me your number. Jack hadn't mentioned this. What can I do for you, Emma? I wanted you to know that I really didn't understand your situation with Daniel. He told me you were separated, that the divorce was just waiting on paperwork. She paused. But I should have asked more questions. I should have been more careful. Yes, you should have. There's something else. Her voice lowered. Daniel came to see me yesterday. He said you were making up stories about the money, that you were trying to ruin him because you were jealous of his success. He wanted me to sign a statement saying your allegations were false. My grip tightened on the phone. And did you? No. Because after our dinner, I did some research. Looked at dates, messages. He told me he was at conferences when he was with me. If he could lie to you about that, he could lie to me about other things. She took a deep breath. And he's not the first professor to take an interest in me. The implication made my stomach turn. Emma, I'm not looking for sympathy, she cut in. Just letting you know that I declined to help him. And I've withdrawn from his seminar. After we hung up, I sat processing the conversation. Emma wasn't the villain I'd initially cast her as. She was young, perhaps naive, but not malicious. Daniel had manipulated us both in different ways. I called Linda to update her on this development. She was pleased. This weakens his position considerably, she explained. If he was trying to get her to make false statements, it suggests desperation. He knows you have a strong case. What's our next move? We have the preliminary hearing tomorrow. Based on your documentation, I'll be requesting temporary maintenance and exclusive use of the marital residence. And the pregnancy? Linda paused. Have you decided whether to disclose it? I placed my hand on my still flat stomach. A new life, conceived amid deception. Not yet. Not until we see how he approaches this hearing. Fair enough. Get some rest, Samantha. Tomorrow will be challenging. The courthouse was colder than I expected, or maybe it was just nerves. I sat beside Linda at one table, while Daniel and his attorney, a sharply dressed woman with an aggressive reputation, sat at another. We hadn't made eye contact since he entered the room. The judge, an older woman with silver hair and piercing eyes, reviewed our filings before addressing us. This is a preliminary hearing to establish temporary arrangements while divorce proceedings continue. Ms. Shapiro has requested exclusive use of the marital residence for her client and temporary maintenance. Mr. Parker's counsel has filed a countermotion claiming financial misconduct on Ms. Parker's part. She looked up. Let's begin with the residence. Daniel's attorney stood. Your Honor, my client has equal right to the marital home. Ms. Parker's unilateral decision to change the locks constitutes illegal eviction. Linda rose calmly. Your Honor, the residence was purchased by my client prior to the marriage and remains solely in her name. Furthermore, we have documentation showing that Mr. Parker has been systematically transferring joint funds to private accounts, including one opened 3 months ago without MS. Parker's knowledge. She presented our evidence. The bank transfers, the credit card statements, the hotel receipts. Daniel leaned forward, whispering urgently to his attorney, who looked increasingly uncomfortable. The judge examined the documents carefully. Mr. Parker appears to have transferred substantial sums from joint accounts. Can you explain this, counselor? Daniel's attorney hesitated. My client was protecting assets he feared were at risk due to Ms. Parker's erratic behavior. The first transfer was made 3 months ago, Linda pointed out. Well before any marital discord was acknowledged. Additionally, we have evidence that Mr. Parker used these funds for expenses related to an extramarital relationship. The Tiffany's receipt and hotel charges were presented next. Daniel stared at the table, refusing to look up. His attorney tried a different angle. Your Honor, Ms. Parker's income significantly exceeds my client's. As a university professor, he has been employed consistently throughout the 15-year marriage, Linda interrupted. And Ms. Parker has supported his career advancement, including paying off his student loans and funding research trips. Furthermore, his actions suggest he was preparing to leave the marriage while taking substantial joint assets. The judge studied Daniel, who finally looked up. Something in his expression must have displeased her because her mouth tightened. I'm granting Ms. Parker exclusive use of the residence until final disposition. As for the financial accounts, they will remain frozen pending full disclosure and accounting. Daniel's attorney made one last attempt. Your Honor, my client is concerned about Ms. Parker's mental state. Her behavior has become increasingly paranoid and controlling. I felt a flash of anger at this transparent attempt to paint me as unstable. Linda must have sensed it because she placed a calming hand on my arm before responding. Your Honor, if Mr. Parker was concerned about my client's mental state, It's curious that he expressed this only after being confronted with evidence of his financial deceptions and infidelity. We have comprehensive documentation supporting every claim. The judge nodded. I've seen enough. Ms. Parker will retain exclusive use of the residence. Mr. Parker may retrieve personal belongings with proper notice and supervision. Joint accounts remain frozen pending full financial disclosure, which both parties will provide within 30 days. She was about to adjourn when I made a decision. I leaned over and whispered to Linda, who looked surprised but nodded. Your Honor, there's one additional matter, Linda said. Ms. Parker has recently confirmed that she is pregnant. This will need to be factored into ongoing proceedings. The courtroom went silent. Daniel's head snapped up, his face draining of color. I see, the judge said slowly. That indeed changes certain considerations. We'll address this more fully at the next hearing. For now, the orders stand as issued. As we gathered our materials to leave, Daniel approached me, ignoring Linda's warning glance. You're pregnant? Were you going to tell me? I met his eyes directly for the first time that day. Like you told me about Emma? Or the secret account? Or the money you took from our future? That's different. This is my child. Is it? I let the question hang, not because I had any doubt. There had been no one else, but because I wanted him to feel a fraction of the uncertainty he'd inflicted on me. I guess we'll need a paternity test to be sure. His face flushed with anger. You know it's mine. I thought I knew a lot of things about you, Daniel. I was wrong. 6 months later, I sat in my doctor's waiting room, hands resting on my now prominent belly. The divorce wasn't finalized yet, but we'd reached a settlement agreement. Daniel would keep his pension and retirement accounts. I'd keep the house and receive child support once the baby arrived. The judge had been unimpressed by his financial deceptions, which strengthened my position considerably. I flipped through a parenting magazine, barely registering the content. My mind was on the ultrasound scheduled for today, the one where we might learn the baby's sex, if it cooperated. Samantha. I looked up to see Helen standing hesitantly by the reception desk. We'd maintained contact throughout the divorce process, her support unwavering despite her son's attempts to turn her against me. I hope you don't mind, she said, approaching cautiously. Daniel mentioned you had an appointment today. I thought, perhaps you might want company. The gesture brought unexpected tears to my eyes. Pregnancy hormones had amplified my emotional responses, but this was more than biology. It was recognition that family connections could survive even when marriages didn't. I'd like that, I said, making room beside me. They might tell us if it's a boy or a girl today. Helen sat down, her posture still slightly formal, but her smile genuine. Daniel says you don't want to know that you've asked them to write it down and seal it. I haven't decided yet. I adjusted my position, seeking comfort against the waiting room chair. Part of me wants the surprise. Part of me hates not knowing. She nodded. Control versus spontaneity. You've always preferred the former. With good reason, apparently. Helen winced slightly, but didn't argue. Daniel tells me Emma has transferred to another university, Princeton. I'd heard this from Jack, who somehow stayed informed about campus gossip. Full scholarship. He also mentioned you haven't responded to his request to attend today's appointment. I sighed. Daniel had been making efforts, attending parenting classes, reading books on pregnancy, sending respectful texts asking about my health. Part of his attorney's strategy, perhaps, but possibly genuine as well. I'm not ready for that. I met Helen's gaze directly. Maybe after the baby comes. Maybe not. I don't know yet. She nodded, accepting this boundary. For what it's worth, I think he regrets his actions. Not just because of the consequences, but because he finally understands what he's lost. Before I could respond, the nurse called my name. Helen stayed in the waiting room while I followed the nurse to the examination room. As the ultrasound technician prepared the equipment, I made a decision. I'd like to know the sex today, I told her. No sealed envelope necessary. She smiled. Changed your mind about waiting? Some surprises are worth experiencing immediately. As the image appeared on the screen, my child, with a strong heartbeat and perfect fingers, I felt a surge of clarity. The path forward wouldn't be easy, but it would be mine to choose. Not Daniel's. Not defined by his betrayal or my reaction to it. Something new, created from the wreckage, but not limited by it. Congratulations, the technician said, pointing to the screen. You're having a girl, a daughter, someone I would teach to recognize her worth, to demand honesty, to walk away from situations that diminished her. Someone who would know that strength sometimes comes from unexpected places, even from pain and betrayal. When I returned to the waiting room, Helen stood anxiously. Everything okay? I nodded, a smile spreading across my face. Everything's perfect. You're going to have a granddaughter. Her eyes filled with tears. May I hug you? I nodded, allowing her embrace. Over her shoulder, I noticed my phone lighting up with a text from Daniel. Please let me know everything's okay. Later, I would respond. I would navigate co-parenting with a man who had broken my trust, but remained my child's father. I would rebuild my life on new terms. But in this moment, I simply placed my hand on my stomach and whispered a promise to my daughter. We're going to be more than okay. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.